In this video, I'm going to walk you through how you're going to manage your forms from a privacy and consent perspective. So in HubSpot, you're going to need to set your standard privacy and consent language and then create your email subscription types. And once those two things are done, you can start creating forms. Now, if you've gone through our L7's privacy and consent workshop, you've completed some worksheets that have this information. So what you're going to do first is, and this is what we do for you, actually, if you're a client of ours, but if you're doing this on your own, you're going to go into the settings and over to privacy and consent, and then click this tab for consent options. And you're going to see the standard default language that comes out of the box with HubSpot for various types of privacy and consent styles. It's really important to understand what the privacy and consent regulations are in the world, because depending on which ones you really need to be compliant with, you're going to select a different one of a style of, based on those requirements. So legitimate interest, for example, is about the simplest that we can get. Nice and clean. It's very simple. It's simply saying, if you fill out this form, we're going to contact you, right? But it could be, especially if you do business at all in the European Union, you might need to be way more explicit, where you've got checkboxes saying you need to check a box that accepting that we're going to store and process your data. And you need to check a box saying that you're okay with us sending you this specific subscription type of communication, right? So make sure that you understand those regulations. Again, if you've worked with L7, we've probably gone through and we've done this workshop. We've reviewed all of these regulations and, come together and decided which is going to be most appropriate for you. So once you've decided which regulations you really need to be compliant with and how strict you need to be here, you're going to go into this section and start editing the default language. So an example, you've got your legitimate interest content. That's the one that you want to choose to move forward with. Go ahead and click edit content and you can change the language here. You can add in links. So this privacy and policy wording can actually link to your privacy and policy page. You can add in bolding, italics, etc. Once you've set your default language here, then we need to also set up your subscription types. So there you would go down to marketing, email, and click on the subscription types tab. These are the types of communications people can opt into within your HubSpot. So when they go to manage their preferences from that, link in the footer of every email you send them, they're going to go to a page that shows these are the options they have, and they can check this box and uncheck this box or unsubscribe from all of them. So you're going to want to go in through here and update these, right? And make sure that these match up with the types that you have. And again, if you've gone through our workshop, we've already done this for you, but you can come back here at a later time and edit what these say. And then you can also reorder them if you want them to show up in a different order on the page. Now, once you have your subscription types, depending on what type of privacy and consent regulations you have to stick with, you may have to go back to the consent options area and make another edit. So if you've got to be really strict, where you're asking explicitly for them to check a box to receive a certain communication type, you need to go down to one of those options, consent to communicate, for example, and you're going to set the default one that would automatically, be set to this language when you add it to a form. So you can click, let's say 1-to-1, and you can actually change the language here, right? And you can change the language for any one that you want. Otherwise, when you add this language to the form, and you add that checkbox, HubSpot's just going to add this. I agree to receive other communications from L7 demo account, right? So you might want to customize that. All right, so now that the language is all set here, we can jump back over to forms and start playing around there. So here's a form that has some privacy and consent language already built into it. But what I want to do is show you how this looks from scratch. So if we create a form and we just go with a basic start from scratch template, we have our email field there, great. Now you'll see that there's no privacy and consent language that's been automatically added to the form. That never happens. You always have to manually add it yourself. And you're going to do that by going down to this option, other form elements, clicking that, and you'll see this data privacy options drop down. You're going to choose the privacy and consent setting that you've decided is appropriate for your company, right? So legitimate interest is usually everyone's favorite, but it's not GDPR compliant. So if you're lucky enough that you don't have to worry too much about GDPR, then this is like the big winner, right? This is a great one. And you'll see it's simply stating that, we're going to store and process your data. We're going to communicate with you. And by submitting this form, you're essentially agreeing to that, right? So there we go. Now that's not enough. You've got, as we saw on the back end here, 4 subscription types set up. Which subscription types should this form be opting people into? The way to set that is by clicking this language. And this is like one of the least obvious things here in this whole experience. So you've got to click that language and HubSpot will bring up settings around it. And you'll see that there's a subscription type already attached to it. So what HubSpot did was it pulled whatever my first option was here and it set it there as the subscription type tied to this form. But let's say that I want to make sure they're opting into everything at this point. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to make sure I'm adding those other subscription types so that they're opting into all of them. Or, you can be very explicit. It's actually, this is just a blog subscription form. I just want it to be the blog. There we go. Then you're going to set what the legal basis for communicating is with this contact. So for the most part, this is probably, oftentimes it's a lead form. So legitimate interest lead is perfectly fine. Now you'll see that the language here is what was pulled in from the backend settings. If you need this language to be different on this form than any other form, you can make edits directly here. Please keep in mind, though, that if you make edits on the form itself, that doesn't affect the language for other forms in any way, and it doesn't change the settings in the back end. It would just be for that form. So there we go. We've added, let's say, everything. We want everything to be subscribed to. Wonderful. Now, as I mentioned, this is like everyone's favorite language, but let's say that you have to be a little bit more strict with how you're doing this. We'll go and delete that, and we'll start again with, let's say, the next one. The next one is this mix where you're asking them to check a box to agree to receive communications from you, but you're allowing the submission of the form itself to be consent for storing and processing their data. This is like dipping your toe into the water of GDPR. It's still not 100% GDPR compliant, by the way. So it's more than legitimate interest. It's less, though, still than what the regulations ultimately require. So we have to make sure there's a subscription type attached to this and the correct ones, right? So again, you're going to want to click on this and you'll see that HubSpot defaulted to the first one in our list, subscription type, that one-to-one. And we'll go ahead and add a checkbox maybe for the other ones, right? So I want them to subscribe to everything on this form. So I'm going to list them all out here. Now this is where the form can get really ugly, right? And long and yikes. And not the best user experience, but it is what it is for this type of privacy and consent option. You can make some of these required, but even that can be crossing the line with GDPR sometimes, right? So you might just leave these checked. They can either check it or uncheck it, and then you can change the language for each individual one here too. So I want to get one-to-one emails, right? And check the box, great. And then we've got this final checkbox option, actually. So I'm going to delete that one and show you the final one, which is the big, seriously strict option. This is, we're asking you to check a box for communications. We're also asking you to check a box explicitly saying you're okay with us storing and processing your personal data. This is the GDPR, the true GDPR compliant option. But once again, you need to add your checkboxes for all of those various subscription types, and then make sure you're updating the language on these if you'd like. Now, the challenge with the way that all of this works in HubSpot is even though you've set the language in the back end and the settings here, this doesn't keep your forms updated. So in 6 months, let's say that you've decided that you want to link, you want to change this language in some way. So we're using legitimate interest on on our forms. We now want to make sure that this privacy and consent piece is actually linking to our page, to our privacy and consent page, right? And maybe we're even changing the language right here. So, For more information on how to unsubscribe, and I'm going to just say, yeah, check out I'm going to cut out this language. Great. Check out our privacy policy. Save. Great. That does not do anything with your forms. That did not update all of your forms. That just created new text for you to use when adding GDPR to your forms. So when you go to create a new form, that new language is what's going to appear for that privacy and consent option. So if we go to legitimate interest, we'll now see the version that has the linked text there and the shortened language, right? But what about your old forms? For example, we have this old form that we created 6 months ago, right? It's not really, but you know what I'm saying. So 6 months ago, we had created our forms. This now needs to update. We want that to have the same type of language. So what you have to do is go and edit all of your old forms. So you'll see here, if I open this form, it didn't get updated with that change. We have to manually do it. And there's an easy way to do it, though it's going to be, this is going to be a tedious process in the sense that you have to go through every single form and update them. But there's an easy way to do it, which is instead of clicking on this and revising the language, just delete it from the form altogether and pull in the latest language. And you'll just go through every form and do that. Delete and bring in the new one. And make sure you update that. And there we go. If you have any questions or concerns about managing privacy and consent via your form, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks so much.